Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Well, today on All Saints Sunday, we're placing ourselves among all those who've come before us and the wider community of faith around the world in order to gain inspiration and confidence for our way forward. Do you ever just kind of pause to reflect on how you're connected in faith to those who've come before? A number of my relatives are buried at Groveland Cemetery up off of Minnetonka Boulevard. I was there for the burial of some of them. For a number of years, Maria and I lived out of the area, and it wasn't so easy to go back. So within a year or two of us moving here, we took our kids to show them the grave sites for my grandparents and my great-grandparents and other relatives also. And as I approached the headstones for the first time and saw their names, all of my memories of them just came flooding back over that many years. And I was overwhelmed. I stood there remembering them as someone who's now kind of middle-aged, and I remembered them when I was just a child, not far from my own age. And when you're that young, you see your grandparents and great-grandparents as giants, not just in stature physically, but in their wisdom and experience. And I remember standing there on that day and realizing that I had taken their place, in a sense. Most of us have a similar reflection at some point. It's kind of universal. Those experiences are overwhelming for so many reasons, but partly because there are layers of gratitude and grief and humility as we realize that we now stand in their position. And as I've spoken with families and individuals working through loss over the years, I know there can be many other emotions and thoughts as well, some of them difficult to process. On this day, when we remember the faithful that have gone before us, the words that always come to mind for me are from the book of Hebrews. We are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. We not only remember those that we personally have known and loved, but we remember our connection to the faithful that have gone before us throughout history, as well as the cloud of witnesses that even surround us today around the world. It's a time to feel united as people of faith across place and time. It's especially meaningful to me that on the same day we're honoring those who passed away this year, we're welcoming new members joining us in our mission and gathering with 6 of our young people and their families so that they can receive their first communion and share in the meal that has been a hallmark of Christian community for over 2,000 years. We're beginning a new series today called Confident and Generous. It's a reflection on where Jesus is calling us to be in our hearts and our minds. And let's be honest, embodying confidence, let alone generosity, is difficult, especially when we're going through challenging times. If we're called to bold faith, more often than we might want, we find ourselves embodying a more timid an uncertain kind. And that's okay, but it doesn't have to remain that way. Next week, I'll have more to say on Paul's letter to the Corinthians, as he wrote about the Christian community in Macedonia that persevered through hardship and found a way to continue embodying joy and gratitude and generosity, even out of their poverty and trials. But today I want to reflect on the passage we heard earlier about the raising of Lazarus. This passage is important not only because we get a foreshadowing of Jesus' own resurrection and glimpse the new life that all of us can expect, but when we understand what was happening underneath this story, it shows us what bold faith looks like and what living with confidence in faith can do. There are a few people in the story that I'm sure you heard: Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, both from the description in the story and from his emotional response. It's possible that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were the closest things Jesus had to friends outside of his disciples. Verse 5 says that Jesus loved them. With the disciples, there's a kind of teacher-student distance, maybe. It's not pure friendship. It can be very close, but it has an element of distance to it. But you get the sense that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are almost like adopted family for him. Jesus wants to go back and restore life to Lazarus for his sake, and so also that the disciples and everyone will believe. This is a defining moment for Jesus. Jesus had just been in Jerusalem, in the area where Lazarus lived, and he was nearly stoned to death by the crowd there. When Jesus talks about going to help Lazarus, his disciples question his decision. It's risky. Do you really want to go back there? And when Jesus makes the decision to go, Thomas says, "Let's go along and die with him." That's how seriously they're taking this. They're pretty sure this is going to be the end for all of them. They'll have a full-scale revolt on their hands. The authorities are increasingly viewing Jesus as a threat, and even religious leaders are looking for reasons to question whether his works are good or not. He's already violated the Sabbath day in their eyes, and they're looking for ways to prove that he's not a man of God, but something worse. Going back to raise Lazarus from the dead is a turning point in the Gospel of John and the ministry of Jesus. The raising of Lazarus is not only the last sign that Jesus performs as recorded in John's Gospel, but it becomes the act that brings the religious leaders together to plot against him. They say immediately after our story today, "This man is performing many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation." Caiaphas, the high priest that year, says, "It's better for one man to die than for a whole nation to be destroyed." It's the beginning of the end. It's a sign of his ultimate power and authority, and as a result, he is a threat that cannot be allowed to continue. Making the decision to go back to Bethany was bold. Jesus goes to sit with Mary and Martha in their grief, which is bold also, to go into a painful place like that. And he experiences it fully himself. In those famous words, Jesus wept also. But he brings more than just comfort and sympathy. He brings life. He reverses the cause of the grief. Jesus gave up his distance from a difficult human situation to enter into the experience of these people that he cared about. We're called to that same bold faith as we're able, to step into desperate situations that require our help, to give our time and attention, to weep with those who weep, to offer our talents and gifts to serve others in the mission we share, to give our resources to serve those who are in need and to make our ongoing ministry possible. We're at our best when we have confidence that flows from faith and a commitment to a mission greater than ourselves. In our bold faith, we're moved to share generously, and we grow in joyful gratitude for what we've received. When we pause to reflect on all those who've gone before us and the sacrifices they made, their time, their energies, their resources, we find strength and inspiration in that. Each one of us is invited to join together and lead our communities in exemplifying this spirit out of a love of God and our neighbor. We have opportunities to do that in every place we find ourselves. And as we recall God's grace and love expressed not just for Lazarus that day, but for each one of us, may God grant you the heart and the will to follow and share your life generously. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.